Chris Kohler, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Mark, great to be here.
It's actually, now, is that your alter ego speaking to me? The way you said that?
Who is it?
Mark, great to be here.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much. Yeah, who is it? You never know.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk about the Chris Kohler that I know from a long time ago. You're a journalist. Maybe give us a little bit of background on your journalism, like where'd you start, where are you now, what you're doing, and some of the organisations you work for, and what do you cover?
Yeah, so I'm the finance editor at Channel 9 nationally. I cover the big picture stuff. My responsibility is interest rates, the economy, housing market, ASX and equity markets around the world. That's my bread and butter. I'm doing the RBA story every time, and I have been doing that for a long time. I've always covered markets and finance, haven't always been in TV. I started out in digital and moved into newspapers. I worked at the Australian newspaper here in Sydney for a few years, and then headed towards Fairfax and eventually made my way into TV via Your Money, which you and I spoke on quite a few times.
Long time ago. Now,
we had lots of chats on Your Money.
A long time ago, though.
It does feel like that, yeah.
And you are the son of Alan Kohler. Hi, Alan. How you going, mate?
Yeah,
who I've known for a million years. And some of our listeners will remember Alan Kohler. I don't know if he still is, but he used to be one of the voices on Qantas planes for many years doing interviews. Right. He was like one of the original podcasters.
Yeah.
We didn't call them podcasts, they were just interviews. But
yeah, he's always like that, the longer form interview format. Yeah.
I did a few with him actually probably in 2004 or something like that, like going back a while. You were about 10. But so your major business interest, and in terms of what your journalism is about the economy, the banking system, big institutions.
Yes.
You're with the largest, if not one of the largest, media organisations in the country. That's Channel 9 Group. But then you have this sort of alter ego. You do have an alter ego. It's Chris Kohler on social.
Yeah, it's increasingly split out, hasn't it? And you get,
totally.
Speaking of splits, you get a sense of my split personalities.
Another personality. But like it's sort of like, I don't know if you're taking the piss or whether you're, in terms of style I'm talking about, because I know you've got a serious topic you're talking about. You're trying to turn it into comedy. Are you going for comedy?
Well, I've never been a comedian, really.
I reckon you're pretty funny.
Well, that's nice of you to say. I mean, it's kind of it helps to send that information down that way. I find I was coming home from long days covering really full on economic and business stories, and I was talking to my wife about them. She's a journalist too, not a background in finance journalism. And the way we were talking about them, I kind of found that, after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I was taking the piss out of the story a bit, and I was kind of doing impressions of people. And we kind of were like, maybe you could do a video on that. It was her idea for me to do my first vertical video on TikTok way back then. And after a while, I just sort of one day decided to do it in a character and just sort of really see what happens, with the theory that how badly could this go wrong? It'll be fine. I don't know. I possibly should have thought about it more, because, your bosses don't necessarily want to see you being an idiot. But it went well, and it sort of ended up growing from there.
Well, comedy, I think, has always been a great way to tell the truth without being heavily criticised for the truth. And particularly someone like you and I don't know which one is your alter ego, whether it's who you are on Channel 9 or who you are on Instagram and YouTube, but it's one of them, or maybe it's a combination of them. But and I think we all have one. But I think what your underlying theme of what you say is, in a sort of piss take way, but not it's not disrespectful either, though. It's but the underlying theme is a truth that you are trying to establish. Let's talk about, say, your latest one, which is I think the one you put up about the RBA. And it was, you might explain, it's you talking to yourself, of course. You're both characters.
Yeah.
So just quickly take us through that. So your conversation, yeah. And what's the theme ultimately you want to, what's your message you really want to get out of that?
Yeah, well, I'm always trying to do it from the perspective of normal people. The ones who are out there dealing with an interest rate hike and dealing with what that means for them and their financial situation in their house. And I was in the room with Michelle Bullock on Tuesday in my journalistic capacity. I mean, we were asking questions about what this interest rate means, where's it come from, what's it seeking to achieve. you only get one question. You don't get to do a full interview. But in my mind, it's really all about how much more we're piling now onto the borrowers in Australia. And they're very vulnerable.
You mean in terms of interest rates or the story around it?
The interest rates.
The actual interest rate itself.
The actual interest rate itself. I mean, this is the mechanism. You and I have talked about this lots of times. It's not a scalpel, it's a sledgehammer. But the sledgehammer hits so much harder when you've got $2.4 trillion worth of mortgage debt. It's not like it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so I just think it's sort of not perhaps being discussed as directly as I might like it to be. And so I kind of went into that room and I thought, all right, I'm the borrower at home. I don't really understand why my life has to get so much harder to solve this inflation crisis.
For everybody else.
It doesn't feel like we're a team right now. It feels like I'm carrying the weight. And that's obviously a perspective thing. I've got parents-in-law who may not be as down about an interest rate hike.
Well, your dad might be happy about it because he might be making money.
Some people are, and I get that. And I have this conversation with older people quite a bit. Hey, why do you only ever talk about it from the position of the borrower? Fair question. But to me, if you get, hit in the face in the street and you drop all your money, that's the story. It's not about the person comes in after and picks up all the money off the ground, the benefit.
Maybe you just explain, because most people don't know this. I mean, and I think part of what you do in your alter ego is actually show us a little bit sort of what happens behind the scenes, which most people don't understand. But you might just open it up a little bit. Michelle Bullock, for those listeners, does a press conference, which is a new thing under Michelle Bullock. Previous Reserve Bank governors have done them down the track or some other time, but rarely the way she does it basically straight away after the release, 2:31 p.m. on Tuesday this week. Mm-hmm. She gets up about an hour later or something like that in front of the media, you guys.
Yeah.
So who gets chosen to go to those things? And how do the questions how do you get a question? What did she say? You only get one question.
Kind of, yeah. It's, as you say, this is a new thing. It's not like we've been able to tinker with the process for a while and give feedback. This has been really happening since I think August last year. So around then, as you say, prior to that, you just got the information and you talk about it. And now, in an attempt to communicate better with Australia, they're using journalists as a conduit, which is great. We appreciate that. So we go along, as you say, the decision's at 2:30. We're in there at 3:30 and Michelle Bullock stands up. As for who gets chosen, will you register? It's not just big media organisations. There's all kinds of small, medium and large newspapers, broadcasters that are represented in there.
Can anyone go? I mean, any media person, so to speak, go?
You can. There are some quite small outfits, I'd say. It's certainly not just the big ones. And it's the most respectful and civilized press conference I've ever been a part of. You see it at political presses or some other ones. Everyone's yelling over the top of each other. Can I get a question? You shut up. I'm just going to plow on with my question. None of that in there. The microphone snakes around the room. Everyone gets one go.
Why is it?
They just set it up like that. They kind of don't want this argy-bargy, everyone's shouting out type of environment, which I think is great. You get one go. There's not the opportunity then for someone who is the bigger personality to bark 5 questions while a quiet person isn't able to ask one. Everyone gets a turn. And I think it's a pretty good system, I got to say. I mean, you do only get one question. The whole thing goes for about 45 minutes. And then you, in theory, have a better understanding of why the interest rates went up, were on hold or went down.
Is that broadcast? So anyone can watch it?
It is, yeah. It's broadcast.
Yeah, so someone can watch it. If I could be a cynic for a moment, Chris, do you think that this process, which we never really existed in the past, this process is about, to use your words, communicating the message from the Reserve Bank governor outside of the written 1.5 pages that they normally issue in the media release? Is it about communicating better, or is it about controlling the message? Because, just so I might just add to that, because in the past, we would look at the 1.5 page media release and we'd all sit back and interpret it, as would analysts in various places, and they would act on it. And your interpretation, you might be writing a piece in the AFR, your interpretation might be not the way the Reserve Bank wanted you to interpret it. Do you think this is an opportunity for them to control the narrative?
I think it's an opportunity for them to be very measured in the extra information they do give. I think they've got to be so careful. if a Reserve Bank or Federal Reserve chair or governor says something, it can move the market. It can wipe out billions. It can add billions. By their very nature, they have to be careful, and you see that with them. I mean, a good question to Michelle Bullock on Tuesday was, Governor, are we in a tightening cycle or are we not?
Because and what did she say?
We had those 3 cuts and then we had this hike. And the question was, all right, we're in a hike. It was David Taylor from the ABC asked. It was a great question. And you could see the cogs turning with Michelle Bullock. And
before she answered.
Yeah. It was a fascinating moment because you could see that she was being careful. You know, technically one hike, they're in a tightening cycle. But she didn't want to say that because in a way that gives forward guidance, which she doesn't want to do. So now you can see this arm wrestle about, how am I going to answer that? And she did a great job, and we can go back and kind of have a look at how she handled that question. But those are the moments, I think, where you see a governor thinking on their feet. It is live, but they are being careful in the message that they're getting out there.
Do you think that our Reserve Bank governor, and it's a hard one for you to answer, but do you think that she's getting a fair go in the media? And do you think what do you think of what because to some extent, some of the media portrayed her as making an error. Yeah. They said, A, you went too early in February last year by reducing rates. B, some are saying you reduced it by too many times last year. Yeah. C, others are saying you should have hiked harder before you started reducing. You know, we're talking about the Warren Hogans of the world and Chris Joys, et cetera. There's a number of them, people you know. What do you think as someone who's been watching this cycle for a long time?
Is she getting a fair go? I think for the most part she is. I think the problem for Michelle Bullock is, as I said, the ammunition that she has sitting on top of that interest rate mechanism is so much stronger than it ever used to be before.
Data, you mean?
Yes. Yep. Well, I mean, just, hiking interest rates means so much more to a person than it ever did before.
The impact is far greater.
The impact. I mean, the potency of that tool is huge now. I mean, I think about it. When I started covering this sort of stuff, it was a pretty boring story, the RPA story. You'd struggle to get people to
it definitely wasn't on the Today Show in the morning.
It didn't lead the news like it does now. That was probably 2010 where I was first out there kind of trying to write about it and talk about it. And the average new mortgage at the time was sub 450,000 nationally. Now it's 694, so 700,000 with a bit of change applied. I mean, that now, by its very nature, Michelle Bullock wasn't running the show back then. She's running it now, and the tool is so much bigger than it ever has been before. So people are paying so much more attention. As for whether she's getting a fair go, I mean, the criticism is right there, of course. I happen to think she's doing a tremendous job of talking about this thing in a pretty level-headed way. She's very open about what we are here to do. We're not
what she's there to do. Yeah,
yeah. As the head of the board, we're here to do inflation, make sure that prices is growing sustainably, and make sure that we achieve full employment. We're not setting all tax settings. We're not doing everything. So I think she's doing a good job of that.
With what she's got to work with.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people who are your own organisation's publication, the AFR, put a firm finger on Jim Chalmers and or the government about fiscal policy and spending. I know you're not in the AFR, but I'm still it's part of the 9 group. There was a firm finger placed on the government. You guys are spending too much. Michelle Bullock did not talk about that. She talked about private aggregate demand, which, by the way, takes money out of the system, and the system has been flooded with money. And part of the flooding of the money is from government. So that was a very clever manoeuvre. Outside of what Michelle Bullock's got to say, what do you think, as someone who's been covering this stuff for a long time, where do you think the government sits in relation to all this relative to the fact that we've now got rate rises on the horizon and we've just had one? Do you think that the government's spending is something that is creating, or is a big part of the creating of this inflation number?
Look, I think it has to be considered to be a part of the role. I mean, I'm sort of lucky in that I cover the finance. I talk about what's happening today and yesterday. I don't necessarily have to make predictions. I get to talk to people like you and economists and sort of take it all and think about it. A couple of the economists that I have a lot of respect for have been saying that. And so you kind of listen to it and you think about administered prices, which Shane Oliver's been talking about a bit, total government spending. I mean, these numbers are big.
Particularly as a percentage of GDP.
Yes. Yeah.
Bigger than ever.
Talking historically, whether you apply context that's historical or global, I mean, these are significant. So I do think that's definitely part of it. And I think the difference, of course, is that politically, they've got to work to an election cycle, whereas the Reserve Bank doesn't. So I think it suits them to when the news is bad to say, right, the Reserve Bank's doing its own thing. We have no control.
They're independent.
They're independent.
Which is what, by the way, just happened.
Yeah.
That's what
they're independent.
The Treasurer said. The independent Reserve Bank board, which, by the way, the government appointed, but recently appointed, only a year ago. Yeah. But they have decided this. Whereas, and we all understand the to and fro in relation to politics, and I guess to some extent, none of us are surprised. I mean, I don't think there'd be too many consumers out there who would be surprised that the government goes missing when things aren't looking good, and the government sort of stands on the dais when things are looking good. I don't really, and to be honest with you, from my point of view, Chris, I'd probably be the same. And there's an old saying in media, give oxygen to good news and smother bad news.
Yeah,
and that's everybody does it.
Of course, yeah.
What's Jim Chalmers going to get up and say? Look, I'm sorry, everybody, we spent too much in the last budget. I guess it'll be a lot will come out of the next budget coming up. Institutions, therefore, people tend not to trust. I really do believe, and I like your view on this. There is, particularly your age group, but there is a growing number of people who once upon a time would just say, look, it's the government, it's fine, whatever. But today who do not trust institutions and or do not trust governments. Trust is being eroded. And to some extent, probably for good reason. You can go through the COVID program, whether that was right or wrong, doesn't matter. People felt like you took something away from me. Something was changed in my life. Was that something that motivated you to set up your alter ego, your other personality?
Kind of. I'm fascinated by the trust dynamic as well in Australia. There's a good set of data that comes out from Roy Morgan called the Trust Index.
Oh, wow.
Most trusted brands, least trusted brands. And one of the ones that I found completely fascinating was that at the end of 2023, Coles and Woolworths were, I think, either 2 and 3 or 3 and 2 most trusted brands in Australia. Fast forward 12 months and they'd fallen 200 places.
Wow.
230, I think. And I spoke to Roy Morgan about this, and they just said, you never see that. You never see that kind of off a cliff for a company that big. I mean, it does happen occasionally. There's 30 places, 40 places. Qantas, when it got done for the ghost flights, big drop there. When Optus got done for,
the breach.
Pick your issue.
Whatever it was. Yeah, cybersecurity at that stage. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this does happen, but people are very alert to how much they trust an institution, what sort of things set them off about it, what smells bad to them, and the fact that the messaging is always so positive, I think, has created a problem. I think the fact that we as a society, as an industry, marketing has gotten so good has now created a bit of a problem for them because it feels like there's never any other side to the pendulum. It never swings back. And where do I say, hey, I hated that, that triple O outage for Optus was truly terrible. Where do I go to talk about that? And so, I thought, well, okay, I can talk about the issue. I'm a journalist. That's my job. I can try it in a few different ways, and all of a sudden you can try it in this way over here. And hey, people are engaging with that. I'll keep doing it.
So what are some of the things that have really jumped off the wall for you?
I was talking about this before, actually. The one that the first one that really went completely troppo for me was when I was talking about competition. I was talking, we've only got 2 major airlines, 2 major supermarkets, 4 banks.
Very good.
So
3 telcos, blah blah blah.
Yeah, basically, and just sort of saying that, not really adding too much commentary, but that alone, that video got 65,000 followers.
Wow.
Within a week. And a lot of them were overseas. And the comments were...
You mean Australians overseas?
Well, a lot of them were people living, citizens of other countries.
Right.
The number of comments in there from people who were saying, it's the same in Canada, or it's the same here in the UK. Keep talking about that. From all over the world was really interesting to me because here I am, Australian journalist, covering what I thought were Australian issues, and I'm increasingly being told that these are global. You just happen to be talking about them in your chair in Australia.
Do you think that globally and as well as here in Australia, that we are the way business is going, particularly with data and smart technologies, and I hate using the terminology, but artificial intelligence, that this chasm between the top 2 or 3 and everybody else is going to grow. Is that something you think? Do you think that this is inevitable?
Yeah, well, we're already seeing that, aren't we? I mean, look at the it depends how you want to look at it. If you look at the market valuations, the market capitalizations of some of those big AI companies on Wall Street, it's absolutely mind-bending.
Yeah.
I think in Australia, that sort of stuff has been going on with the big banks for the last few years. I mean, I looked it up the other day. Market cap, as I speak to you, for Commonwealth Bank is somewhere around the $260, $270 billion mark. I mean, that means that it is bigger than Telstra, Coles, Woolworths, Origin, Harvey Norman, JB Hi-Fi, handful of others combined.
Altogether.
And that's happened relatively quickly. You know, the valuations, and of course, CBA is not on its own. It's one of the big 4, and Macquarie is now increasingly a big 2. The valuations that we have of those companies is massive. So I don't know. I just feel like we don't get to talk about it all that much. And I'm always interested. It's such a funny feeling, Mark, to be on the other side of these questions from you, because I often ask you about this sort of stuff. What do you think about the size of the big banks now? I mean, you know, you are somebody who knows better than anyone in the country about how many lenders we have in Australia.
Not enough. We have 30 lenders, but 92% of all lending is done by 4.
Yeah.
And the amount of loans you said earlier, but the size of the mortgage market is massive, which is why no one from overseas has ever been able to come in and crack this market, because Big 4 have a stranglehold on the whole system when it comes in every part, not just lending, every part of the banking system. And we've seen a whole lot of international lenders come here and try and have a crack. Even General Electric, who was the biggest finance company in the world, came here and didn't do too well. And because the banking systems have got a complete claw hold on everybody. And but at the same time, Chris, they are also some of the most profitable banks and some of the safest, probably the safest banks in the world outside of Rabobank. And they definitely are the 4 big banks are the highest rated, independently rated banks in the world. And on market cap, they are the most profitable banks in the world relative to the market capitalization.
Do you think they're the best run?
I think, I would say so. Yeah, I think as retail banks, yes. They probably are. They're very well run. And Australians too, by the way, are very sophisticated as consumers of banking. So that sort of forces the banks to be better at what they do too. But like you go in the US, there's like 11,000 banks. And, you know, there's a Connecticut Women's Bank that exists just in Connecticut, one branch.
Right.
You know, they got banks everywhere. So they don't have the technology. They don't have the scale to employ the technology. They don't have the products. They don't have the scale to justify the products, et cetera, et cetera. So they are much less sophisticated. They're much smaller. And by the way, there's bank failures there all the time. So, and our regulator here, I mean, it's pretty boring, but like our regulator here, APRA, is a bloody good regulator, relatively speaking, because it doesn't have that many people to regulate, or banks to regulate, but our banks are so well run. So it regulates them quite well. I mean, to some extent, they're probably over-regulated, but at the same time, it keeps our financial system really stable.
Yeah.
And Australia, as a result, I guess, you know, like our AAA rating here has a lot to do with the fact that our banks are very stable.
So strong. It's interesting to hear you say that about APRA, because I think one of the things that I often hear is criticism of our regulators, whether it's ACCC, ASIC or APRA. And I actually don't have that much time for that conversation. I think they do a very good job. I think they're pretty sharp. I think they hand over very well researched cases to the federal court when they need to, and I think they've claimed some pretty big scalps in the last few years.
Well, ASIC definitely has, and our APRA too. Like, what's interesting during the GFC, there was a couple of banks who got absorbed into the system. You know, Sir George got taken over by Westpac. Bank West got taken over by CBA. There's quite a number of mergers, and more recently we had all those neobanks. Some of those neobanks had a lot of trouble raising enough capital to continue to grow because they couldn't attract enough deposits to be able to lend. you haven't heard of any failures. They've all been absorbed into the banking system. So the regulator is very good at encouraging the bigger guys to make sure that there is no failures in our system. We haven't had any failures in our system.
Do you think we would have?
Bank, yeah, but for the regulator.
Wow.
And those banking licenses don't exist anymore, but those systems have been absorbed up the line either into CBA, Westpac, ANZ, NAB, etc., Macquarie. So the big five have been very compliant and I would say very accommodating to the regulator, but at the same time the regulator's looking after them too. So, and it's all about financial stability, and we enjoy in this country an extraordinarily stable financial system. I mean, sure, we've got interest rates going around the joint. We can be forgiven for feeling like we've got brain damage because this time last year we had an interest rate reduction, getting told that inflation was under control.
Yeah.
And a few months later we got another rate reduction, and then we were being told that the current interest rate settings by the Reserve Bank was restrictive. And that question that was asked by the ABC in the presser after the RBA meeting this week was a good one because we all thought we were in the restrictive environment, and now we're probably in some other environments. Last week's one being stimulatory, because you have to say to yourself, well, if inflation's gone up and private demand, aggregate demand is increasing, we must be stimulating the economy. So you can be forgiven for that. But outside of that stuff, our banking system, our financial system is very stable and it's really good. So whilst I compete with the banks in some respects, and whilst I also deal with the banks in some respects, and whilst I don't like oligopolies, generally speaking, where a few control many, just in a principle sense, I also celebrate the fact that as a result of those things, we are very stable compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah,
we're in good shape. But if we're looking at institutions, and you told me about, you gave me that one particular example of what has worked really well for you, that is talking about how Australia, and probably the rest of the world is the same case, is pretty much in every industry, it's 2 or 3
consolidation
for everybody else.
Yeah.
Yep, consolidation has happened over time. What else has kicked off really hard for you?
It's funny, this is going to sound completely different, and it arguably doglegs conversation in a way that we may not want to do.
No, I'm happy with dogleg.
We'll do it anyway. I do basically, and have done 2 types of videos. Hey, have a look at this weird thing that's going on in the economy. I reckon it's worth talking about. And the other type is historical business stories. I bet you didn't know that this is how, Post-its were created, or how they came up with the Pringle, or, and I think they have done really well. People like a kind of a funny story about how Blockbuster came a cropper, or how, would you remember when Yahoo had the chance to buy Google for $1 million and said no, or the time that not that long ago, Samsung's batteries kept blowing up. I think they're funny. I can't stop reading about them. I love those books. And I think they kind of lend themselves to occasionally reminding people that executives can be kind of
vulnerable.
Yeah.
We make mistakes.
That's a nice way of putting it. I think sometimes people at home kind of like looking at these guys as, oh, whoops, what did I do?
Yeah, totally. So are you naturally muck around type of guy, a naturally funny guy?
Yeah, I muck around. I mean, I muck around with my kids all the time at home. I mean, it's hard because the job is so serious. You tie on, microphone in hand, tell me the story. But I, muck around.
Because I have to be honest with you, like your dad, Alan, is, I mean, I compared to him, you're so different. Like, I used to watch ABC News all the time, and for those people who don't know, Alan used to be, I don't know if he still is, but was always on at the end of the news, and he'd have a little finance thing, and he'd say, that's finance, or something like that, right at the end of it. Yep. And he'd go for a minute or two, and he used to explain things brilliantly, but he would be standing there in front of the camera, and his hands used to always be down by his side. Is this true? Like, am I true? Am I right? Yeah. Man, I wish I could do it. His hands were sort of like that. Like, he looked really awkward. Really awkward. And
look, a lot of that comes down to framing. I don't think that's his fault. But yes, he's
the opposite to funny. Yeah. But it could be that he's a really funny bugger.
He loves to, I think he's very funny. He loves to knock the audience off balance. Like he'll talk about the NASDAQ, the All Ords, commodity prices, and then all of a sudden he'll put up a chart showing the price of kiwi fruit.
Yeah,
and everyone at home will be like, hang on.
Where'd that come from?
What? What?
It's out there.
And he loves it. That's why he's been doing it for so long. I think he really liked it. And I've talked to him about this a lot of times. And obviously I grew up watching him. I mean, the way I present is modeled on the way he presents. But he's told me more times than I can count that he has always had the opinion. And he's been a finance journo since the beginning as well. He was 17 when he started covering finance. And he's still doing it in his 70s. His view is, I understand that not everybody's up for a big chat on finance every night on the news. I want to thank you for tuning in and paying attention to me, and I want to thank you by giving you something to go, huh.
Yeah, because by the way, that is true. There is a moment there. That's something I didn't know about before.
Yeah, and that's him winking and saying thanks, and I think that's a great thing to do.
He'll pull out some sort of graph, and I think, how long did it take to put that thing together? And but it's about some weird type of thing, and to some extent, what you're doing is similar, but on a modern platform.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. I mean, I kind of
it is.
I've talked to Dad about these videos a lot of times to get his thoughts. Obviously, he's a mentor of mine in addition to being my dad, and he's been so supportive. He's appeared in a bunch of them.
Has he? Yeah. I haven't seen those ones.
I'll send them to you.
No, I got to see those ones.
Yeah, no, he likes it. We both have a lot of fun when we do that because we talk about economics all the time. I mean, that's the great thing about being in the same industry as a parent. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who might be in the same sort of industry. And, your halftime at the footy, you're talking about your siblings or the house at home or whatever. All of a sudden it flows into work chat, the economy, and it flows back out. I mean, it's great. And so when we sit down to do something like a video, he's, we're on the same page automatically. It's really nice.
Was it a discussion at family barbecues or at home at night? I presume it's not live. I don't know if when he used to record his stuff, would he be at home for dinner and you'd all be sitting around and say, "Hey, Dad, we saw in telly tonight, or we're going to watch you on the ABC tonight." And did you guys discuss what he was going to talk about?
Yeah, yep. We always turned it down. Watch Dad. We'd kind of sit there and we watch it. It was definitely ABC was always on when I was a kid, and so me going to Channel 9 for my family was a bit. Oh, okay, let's watch some Channel 9 now.
Wow.
So I obviously am a huge fan of Peter Hitchener, but it's not the same. We wasn't on in our household all the time. But now, my mum gets to say, well, Dad's on it at 7 and Chris is on at 6, so I can watch both. So it's kind of nice. But yeah, no, definitely. We always talked a little bit about it at the end of what he said. And if I had a question, I had this incredible resource where I could ask him, can you tell me more about that?
He's a great economist.
Yeah.
Like he really is a great economic, particularly as an economic journalist. His detail is very good. But he does also do business interviews.
Yes.
Like he interviewed me a couple of times, like about business, about my business.
Oh, totally.
Like and which is sort of not dissimilar to what you do as well.
Well, I think I can see why he did. I mean, he loves those perspectives. He wants to know what it's like on the ground, as a good journalist always should. What is going on in that space? You can tell me better than anybody else because you know. And I think that's coming back to the fact that I do these two types of videos. I mean, I think it's important for both of us, because we have to be critical of business, to also make sure that everybody knows that we are pro-business.
Yeah,
we like them. We think they're great.
Well, you are.
Well,
not every. I can't say about every journalist, but definitely you are.
Yes, I mean, I don't want that to get lost. I think is because I do criticize industries, and I think by doing ones where you talk about a historical business story, hopefully you can see some affection come through. But I do like this. I think that there's nothing wrong with the pursuit of profit. I think there's absolutely no issue in starting and growing a business, and I can see why incentives lead you to consolidate. All this kind of stuff makes sense to me. It doesn't mean that you need to get a free pass, but it also doesn't mean that I hate anybody really out there.
When you see someone like Joe Aston, you probably mates with Joe. Joe, when he sort of went hard on Qantas,
yeah.
There's no secret. Joe's made a career out of it. He's killed it. What does a journalist like you think about that? Do you think it's brave, courageous, or do you think it's smart, or do you think it should be done? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm very glad that we live in a country where we don't have censorship and we can have a really open media that everybody's kind of able to do whatever they want. And if there's an audience for what Joe's doing, then
good luck to him.
That's right. I mean, I think what you find out very quickly is whether or not people are listening to you, paying attention to you. And in a way, the audience is in charge. And so you kind of go, right, we've got this beautiful, big, increasingly fractured and multifaceted media space. that's kind of good for audiences. They can listen to all kinds of stuff. And Joe, he's not just griping; he does a lot of research.
A lot.
And that's the thing. Rigor is at the base of good journalism and actually doing the work. And so I think, there's not a whole lot of problem with that.
He likes to uncover the pure truth, maybe even go against the narrative, like what everybody thinks. He's very good at that. That's a real pure journalism. So do you ever think to yourself, I want to be taken as a serious journalist, which you are, or be known as a serious journalist like Joe is? Because Joe never really sort of takes a piss or does a skit. It's either, a 1 hour presentation like on his podcast, or it's a big article, like deep. So Joe's known for one thing. You're known for Sirius 6 p.m. news, but at the same time, you're becoming more well known for your skits. Let's call it your skits. And I'm not trying to do a disservice by saying the skits. They are skits, but talking about serious, important topics. Do you ever get this ache that you want to be known to be one or the other?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, I think. I benefit from the fact that I can do both simultaneously. And I can present the news. I can do the RBA story and talk about it, ask a question of Michelle Bullock in my capacity as a journalist, and then I can also go back and think about it and present it as a skit, something comedic. Look, the way I think about it is that journalism isn't one thing. Today, and really ever. I mean, hard news has always sat alongside journalistic opinion, journalistic analysis, columns. We give that right to certain members of the media and say, you can write a weekly column and I'll read it, read your thoughts, see what you got to say on this, because you take it all in and, you tell me the news, but now I want to hear what you reckon. I think of these videos, these skits, as kind of like a column in a way. I mean, it's just me. It's me talking about what I think about it, the way I'm processing the information. It's not hard news, but I like to think of it as sort of, it's in that sphere. It's adjacent. I mean, it's kind of, it's sort of in that ballpark somewhere in a new world. It's kind of, in a way, it grew out of frustration. I do interviews, as you know, and sometimes, you get the sense that CEOs or CFOs, just like politicians, are getting so polished in what they can and can't say that you end up getting a spiel that you didn't really ask for. And so you go home and you go, what do I reckon they really wanted to say? And then you do it yourself.
You do it yourself. You become them. Because I think that's very interesting. Because I think that where we're at now is precisely what you just said. In terms of mainstream news, TV, radio, newspapers, that mainstream stuff, the spokesperson for an industry or an institution or an organization have become so well honed on controlling the narrative, including politicians, and they have a bevy of people sit below them and telling them what to say and how to say it. And even the Reserve Bank governor, she gets advised by media advisors before she gets up. Then she's probably even doing, Q&A and stuff like that, making sure that she's tested out where she's going to go, because we don't want her misleading the market or not misleading the market, but by saying something into the marketplace that could actually cause a problem or create an outcome. So that makes sense to me. And of course, the RBA has been bitten hard from the previous governor who made that statement about interest rates not going to go up for another year or so. They would have learned their lesson hard way there. So that makes sense that people are much more polished. But as a result of them being much more polished, it doesn't matter how hard you press as a good journalist in a serious conversation, you're not going to get out of them what we want to really hear. You can. So
I totally agree.
We're just not going to get it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, or Macron, or, whoever it is, our Prime Minister as well. We're just not going to get the information we really need. And do you think, therefore, mainstream media is, to some extent, has been a bit hobbled by this process of people becoming really sophisticated in terms of delivering their message?
Yeah, so much media training has gone into it. I agree. I think the messaging has become so slick it's just hard to break in. And I think people at home kind of see it and they go, okay, fine, fair enough. The CEO of whatever company has said that thing. And actually, I think it's one of the things that you do so well. When you go, like you're a CEO, you've run businesses for years. When you go on Today's Show or anything else, you're speaking like a human being. It's actually really.
I don't know any other way to talk.
It's actually pretty rare, Mark. Like, as you just said, but like you see all these people say, we have had a positive year. Yes, we have had. And instead, you might say, yeah, it's been a cracker. It's been really good. And people go, what a normal guy.
Yeah. I understand what he's talking about.
Yeah. And I think there's, I wonder if there's a pendulum to be had here. It swings really hard into the polished world. And then a couple of people break through and speak clearly and in a way that is relating to people at home. And then the pendulum maybe starts to swing back and there's sort of a less need to be so polished and precise. And that, maybe it's not the end of the world. Like obviously, as you say, if you're a central banker, you've got to be careful.
Yeah.
But if you're the head of an organization, I mean, can you call it how it is in your own mind? Are people going to, hate you terribly? Is the share price going to collapse? I don't know. Someone's going to have a crack, though.
Institutions who do analysis on you might think that you're being inappropriate, but I think the common person likes it, and I think that's where that's what you've sort of linked yourself into, because social media hopefully doesn't become really polished like mainstream media has, but more people listen to social media or watch social media, and they do it in these 1 or 2 minute bites.
Yeah.
And we do it when we want. We don't want to do it by appointment. I mean, I think most of us, I love the 6 p.m. news. I mean, it's part of my life. I grew up with it, blah, blah, blah. I got all that. But these days I'm really home at 6 p.m. anyway. But I get all my media through social media.
Yes.
Everything. There's nothing on the news at night they're going to, very rare anyway, that in terms of main stories, which is why they have some silly little stories at the end these days. But the main stories that I haven't already heard about, probably at 9 o'clock in the morning and probably read 5 different versions of. And as a result of that, mainstream media has become, with the greatest respect to you at the 6 p.m. news, a little bit of already heard all that. And I might have actually seen you on social media before I saw you on the 6 p.m. news.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, look, I think, and I will obviously defend the media organisations that I work for. I think that
I know there's a place for them.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong.
No, of course, and they are filled with people who are doing really good work. And I think the important part is that it's locally, professionally reported. Like these are the people who go and knock on the door of the local member in New South Wales or in Victoria or in WA. So much of social media is global in its reach and global in its attempt. What you see from the major media organisations here is that they are thinking here. They want to talk to these people in this state. And I think that that's important. And I think we kind of shouldn't overlook that.
That's one of the things I love about regional news.
Yes, yeah.
Like if you go up to Lismore or Byron or that sort of area, you can turn on Channel 9 and you find out what's going on actually in the area, in the region.
Yeah.
And they give you a little bit of Sydney maybe, but most of it's about what's going on in the region. Same in Queensland. It's great. But your social media environment, is that Chris Kohler's? Do you own that yourself? Is that your own thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your employer's okay with you to do that sort of thing? Do you have to get approval? Like it probably helps them. It's probably good for them that you're spending the time and effort and money on doing this. Yeah. Because it actually elevates your profile and people will turn into the news. Yeah.
Look, I think there's a kind of there's obviously an awareness of it. There's a consciousness there. There is a sort of an implied and sort of explicit but unnecessary to say, encouragement not to be a complete idiot.
Yeah.
Not to defame anyone, not to break the rules in any
Well, you understand how that works anyway.
Yeah, but you just, it's important, I think, to apply those standards in whatever you do. But for the most part, support and a sort of a willingness to see how those experiments go,
Yeah, but I to some extent it is, I mean, if I was Nine, I would be encouraging that for you to do that on your own time, your own dime. But also I would be interested to see how it's going, because I probably, if I was running Nine or involved in Nine, I would take the view that we don't have the bandwidth to do that sort of stuff anyway. But if you are successful at it, then maybe that's something we as an organisation, if I was at Nine, we should actually start to encourage others to do it, to start to do the same sort of thing. Because over time, I would imagine mainstream and social mediums are going to have to combine. over time, because like if you're a media company, you want all the medias.
Yeah.
You want all the medias.
I think the thing that I hear a lot from people is mainstream media versus new media. And I mean, the new media organisations have been around for 20 plus years now in Australia. I mean, what's mainstream anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about the mainstream eyeball, if we're talking about, how much time we're spending with things, I mean, what is mainstream? People call it legacy media, people call it new media. I mean, you are right. That mix is happening. It's a big mixing pot of content now. I feel very strongly about journalistic standards. You may not see
that's
that.
Important. That by the way, that's very important.
Yeah. I mean, people might be listening to this and going, I see this guy on social media. What journalistic standards? He's talking to himself, and that's fair.
Yeah, but you're not lying. You're not defaming.
Yeah.
You're not being erratic.
No, and it comes from, like, I've obviously read the information that I'm passing on. Like, if I say a number, it's a real number. I'm not pulling it out of my backside or anything like that. So it's becoming, I suppose, a little bit mistier to sort of see in this big mixing pot of content what's real, what's been generated, who this person is, who they work for, where the money's coming from, all these sorts of things. I think we are it's all happening in real time. We're figuring this out live,
Where do you think this will end up then, Chris? Where do you think what you're doing in terms of social media is going to end up? Is there anything that you see that's exciting about it? Like your numbers increasing? Are you getting great feedback, fantastic engagement? Is it being shared overseas? People sort of saying to you, mate, you really touched on something very important there that we don't get from watching the news at night or something along those lines. Because the news at night is just little packages.
Sure.
That's the model.
Yep.
It's same as radio. It's little packages, ads, little packages, ads. I mean, that's the business model, which is fine. What are you seeing? What do you feel for the future?
I am excited. I'm excited about the prospect of being able to be different things for different parts of the audience. If you want to see me on the news, you're going to see me covering a story in my capacity as a journalist in that way, in that I'm going to get the experts, you're going to hear from them, you're going to be able to see the data, I'll tell you where the data's come from, and all this sort of stuff.
And run by various industry standards, legaled internally, responsibly done.
Yeah.
Then?
That's right. If you want to see me on social media, have a bit of a laugh about the situation, a serious situation, then that's what I really like doing too. I don't want to be like, the thing about the finance and the economy over the last few years is that it has been heavy duty.
Oh my God.
It's just like, I get up and I do the story. I mean, I walked in, I live in Melbourne. I go into the Melbourne newsroom. I come into the Sydney one to do the RBA stories and to kind of other stories here and there. There was a while there where I was coming in and they go, oh, the Grim Reaper's here.
Why? Because I'm the bad news.
Because I'm the bad news bear. I've got rates are going up. The unemployment rate's not doing what it's supposed to.
Inflation's out of control. Cost of living's gone mental.
That's right. Or the property market, particularly around COVID, all this sort of stuff. And so I think it's certainly been my experience, and I think I'm not alone in this. You got to laugh about it sometimes. It's so bad all the time. You just kind of have to go, right, we're in $2.4 trillion worth of mortgage debt, everybody. Should we have a gag about it? Should we just sort of like try to have a bit of a laugh here?
So maybe just so people know, is it Chris? It's Chris Kohler, obviously, Kohler.
It's Chris Kohler News.
Chris Kohler News.
One word.
That's your Instagram page, and it's also your YouTube channel as well. And you have written a book that says How They Get You, Sneaky Everyday Economics and Smart Ways to Hold On to Your Money by Chris Kohler. And the Bouris boys, which I love, said brutally honest, perfectly humorous. And it's sort of interesting that the Bouris have put a little review there.
That was very kind of them.
Yeah, and Alan Fells, previously the ACCC head commissioner, insightful and highly amusing. Good man, Alan Fells. I like Alan Fells.
Yeah.
He's one of the good guys.
Yeah,
he really is one of the good guys.
He's incredibly switched on.
But what's this book about, mate?
Look, for those people who like the videos and sort of go, okay, that one was about supermarkets. I like that. That one was about insurance. That was interesting. That one was about banking. It dawned on me that these videos are just a door into a much bigger room where there's a lot more going on. And so I wrote the book. Each chapter covers a different thing, basically.
I think you wrote it.
Whether it's superannuation, whether it's mortgages, auctions, Black Friday, microtransactions in gaming. I mean, there's gambling, different chapters, 24 different chapters.
Chapter 1 like is called subscriptions. I mean, you're basically warning us about being oversubscribed.
Well, I'm commenting on the scale at which it's effectively taken over.
It's a new thing.
It relatively new, and I mean, it showed itself kind of around the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, to be honest, that's what Netflix killed Blockbuster with. And now it's everywhere. Everything's a subscription. And I think the problem for people trying to keep control of their household budget is that it's very hard to tell what I'm getting billed for every bloody month and what I need to go to the supermarket or elsewhere for. It's becoming quite hard, I reckon.
And you got food delivery. Do you mean like Uber Eats, as in Uber Eats?
Yeah.
That type of thing. Like, I don't go to the restaurant anymore. I don't cook either. I call it in.
Yeah. I loved writing that chapter. That was one of my favorites to write because I see those e-bikes everywhere.
Yeah.
People are ordering stuff all the time. And I looked it up. To get a burrito from my local Mexican joint, which I like, was X amount. To get it delivered from Uber Eats was Y amount. The difference is 45% more expensive.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense. I'm ordering a taxi for my dinner.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth.
But it's convenience economy. We know how that works. We know there's a cost associated with it, but it's a lot of money. And the businesses themselves, the small businesses, the restaurants, they're not particularly big fans of it.
And they don't make much money out of it. And you got to hear loyalty programs in chapter 4. It's very interesting. I think we've become a little bit more reserved about loyalty programs to the extent that they're valuable. But loyalty programs, and as I look through the whole list here, Black Friday, data, auctions, the process of auctions, insurance, buy now, pay later, BNPL. How much of this, all your chapters, do they reflect changes in society?
I think they all do.
Yeah.
I think that was the intent of the book, to say you might be aware of subscriptions, and we are all aware of loyalty programs, but the rate of change, I think, makes it worth talking about now. What we knew in 2019, everything's changed.
So this is really, to some extent, a social commentary.
I think so.
And by the way, what's very interesting about that is, I noticed you got a cartoon right at the front. Okay, so the new Heart subscription was a success. Sorry, the what? So subscribing to make sure, because I actually, I'm Black Mirror, the series Black Mirror.
Yes, yeah.
I saw one of the episodes was actually about something like that. Someone got an implant, and there was a subscription process to get this implant. I can't remember what it was now, what it was I was subscribing to, but the subscription kept getting talked into doing an increase.
Yes.
And but if you want this to happen, you have to pay more. It's gone from $10 a month to $20 a month. But at the end, you get to a point where you can't afford it anymore. Yeah. And that in itself, I mean, that episode of Black Mirror actually made me think about technology, but the technology, because all these chapters, while they are reflections on social changes, they're all technology driven.
They are. And I think that's,
every one of them.
That's really important. And I think particularly in subscriptions, but really in everything, industries test the boundaries and then they pull back if they go too far and they test it again. We're all buying electric vehicles now, but some of the biggest some of the biggest car makers in the world will sell you a car, and then for a subscription, the car will go a little bit faster. I mean, that's revolutionary in the car business, and a way to make it not a one-off transaction, but a subscription. I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing, really. And there's, people get cross, but they kind of pay it anyway, and all of a sudden it becomes industry standard. I mean, these is how those changes are made, and they're all happening now. I see this as a big moment for those sorts of changes.
It's interesting because, in business or business modeling or business modeling in terms of valuation modeling, someone who receives a vendor who receives subscriptions from a consumer gets quite a big valuation because the money comes in every month, and valuers like to see that stuff in terms of looking at the value of a business. And what's happened is the marketplace has worked out wherever we can get a subscription, we should try to get a subscription because it's actually a much bigger value add to the total bottom line value of our business. I'm not necessarily saying profits, but just how people look at the value of these businesses, because it's sort of safer, it's chunkier. You're not relying on one or 10 advertisers, for example, to pay you an advertising fee, which gets changed every year. People go broke, things happen, everything changes. Subscription is little bits that no one notices. You're paying it. It's not as big a deal for you to pay $20 a month. And just picking on that one particular chapter, the fact that it's an amazing reflection on how technology is now shaping our society and how all of us are bit parts in that. In that we all we do is we fall into line. We buy the electric car, we pay the subscription. We go to Netflix, we pay the subscription. We enter in loyalty programs because I spend a lot of money these days on my credit card because everything I spend is on my credit card because there's no cash anymore. So I've got to use my credit card for everything. So if I'm going to use my credit card for everything, I might as well get free flights or whatever
Points,
it is, points, and then work out how to sell those points commercialize those points in my favor. And we all get caught up in this scheme, and I don't think it's an evil thing, but it's interesting that your book and each of the chapters in your book is actually sort of a commentary on all that, and is actually sort of brings it to life a little bit, makes us think about it. Was that your objective?
It was, yeah.
Think about this stuff.
Saying that, I mean, that was certainly the objective. Is that it's so easy to carry on and not notice the change over time because it's nobody comes out and says, "Hey, by the way, the loyalty points actually aren't that good of a deal," and maybe.
But I got you hooked.
And like subscriptions, everybody kind of thinks about the positive because the positive is presented to us. You don't have to worry about it. We're just going to send you this thing every month. Forget
more
it.
choice.
Wipe it off your to-do list. We sorted you. Of course, as a consumer, that's not a good thing. You should be active. If I'm buying nappies, I'm at the supermarket and I'm, this is fresh because I got little kids, but I'm making a decision based on what I perceive to be quality, value, price.
Yeah.
If I do that over a subscription, I'm making that assessment once for the months and months ahead. And that's not the way I'm supposed to operate. I'm supposed to go into the supermarket and go, you know what, last time they weren't very good actually, and I'm going to try this new one that I just see pop up. This is how we're supposed to be as consumers. It's more pain. It's a pain, to do it.
But do you think the reason? But sorry, Chris. Do you think the reason for that though is just on subscriptions, for example, and the reason for that, and all of these things, is because we are much busier today because we keep talking about productivity, right? And I've actually got a bit of a bugbear about this. I think we are, as individuals, much more productive as a person than we ever have been, but we are more productive for the economy. And what I mean by that is every individual is spending much more time doing new things, learning new things. You might have a side hustle. You're maybe using AI to learn language. You might be watching more television. So you could. I mean, it's not doing anything for the economy, but it's much more productive in terms of your time. You are spending every minute of your time doing something. Yep. Whereas before, we got home at 5:30. We turned the TV on, watched the 6 p.m. news.
Call you.
No one called me.
Or messaged you.
Nothing happened. And I talked to my family, and I was productive in terms of cultivating relationships with my family. I might have a beer. I might go to bed in the morning. I probably didn't go to the gym because I got no pressure socially to go to the gym. I got up and I just wandered to work. And then Saturday, Sunday, I did nothing. I went to the footy and just sort of enjoyed my play golf, whatever the case may be, watch my kids play footy. Today, I actually am troubled with the fact that people say our productivity is low. I think our productivity analysis, at least in this country anyway, is not correct because it's not including everything we do, and business has worked that out about us, and therefore keeps us more busy. So we are more busy now than we've ever been our whole life. Yep. Look at you. You're working on, then you're writing books and you're doing your skits and then you've got to post them on YouTube. You've got to edit them. You've got to put on, you've got to think about it. You're probably more busy than you've ever been before.
I am.
Doesn't mean you're earning more money. We're not earning more money, but we're more busy. A lot of times we're doing a lot of these things, and then it's probably and of course you would be reading stuff, and AI will be making you check stuff, and you might have a thought, and you might pump it into Copilot or into Anthropic, wherever it is, or put them in both, like I do, to check whether they give me the same answer, and then you start playing with your other topics like the Reserve Bank, etc. But you might be doing completely other topics, something completely nothing to do with anything. Do you think that you are more productive, and do you think we are more productive? In other words, we are producing more outcomes, not necessarily economically able to be economically measured, but do you think we are, as a society, we are more productive, particularly your generation?
It's really nice to hear you talk about that, because I've had the same sorts of questions. Are we really not as productive? Where's this productivity issue coming from? All this sort of stuff. And it's kind of nice to hear you talk about that. I'm certainly doing more. I look around and I see everybody else is pretty busy too.
Everyone's busy.
Yeah. And I think adding to that, of course, when it comes to being a consumer and how busy we are and whether or not we want something to be taken off our plate, my God, yeah, sure, sort out the nappies, whatever. I think we are marketed to very expertly as well, on social media and off. I think it's become such a great, and you got to take your hat off to the people in that sector. They do just an incredible job of making you want to do something, making you want to buy that product.
Well, they know what you want.
Yeah.
They know that because they've got the data. They got the data.
And this is and if you read the chapters on things like loyalty programs, you see that my case is effectively that these are data generating machines. They're not points. We're not trading in points. We're trading in data, and that's extremely valuable. And the exchange rate for points to our data is way out of kilter.
Yeah, we're not getting proper value because we're not really thinking about it.
Yeah,
because we're nearly, I know this is getting a bit spooky, but are we in a simulation? But yes.
Yeah,
because we're all subscribing, we're all Netflixing, we're all buying Uber Eats, we're all not, doing everything. And like you're talking about, we're all running around trying to do side hustles. We're all working in a mainstream job. We're all getting a mortgage. We're all doing everything the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
That's why books like this are great, mate, because it actually makes us think. You've made me think. I mean, I'm here talking to you about it, but you made me think we're definitely not in a simulation. I don't think we're in a simulation, but it's quite possible.
That's nice, because if the shoe's on the other foot for once, that's great, because the amount of times you've made me think and I've interviewed you and come off better for it.
No, but I do believe that, because and I think it takes. That's why I love talking to younger people, and you're much younger than me, and I'm more your dad's vintage, and you guys, I do believe that societally we do not give your generation and the generation younger than you enough credit for the thinking processes that you guys undertake. And your generation and the younger generation of you actually often get accused as being not lazy, but not being as work committed as we were, like when I was your age. And I think that's bullshit. I just think you just got a lot more to deal with. I mean, I just think there's just a lot more shit going on, a lot more stuff going on where you're more engaged and you actually have a better view compared to us. We're very block viewed. I try to be wider because I have a show like this, so I have to be. And I have the opportunity to talk to people like you. Most people don't have that opportunity, which is why I do the show. By the way, I do this show. This is not a money making thing. I do this show to expose audiences to people like you and your way of thinking, or the way of thinking of a UFC fighter, or the way of thinking of a politician or a banker. I had sitting in that chair, I had Anthony Miller, the CEO of Westpac Bank. I wanted to expose our audience to the way the boss of a big bank thinks.
Yeah.
And that they're not big baddies either. And, like Anthony Miller is actually a really good, humble, smart guy, committed to Westpac, to his bank and to his shareholders and to his staff. And I'm lucky. I mean, I get to do that. And I mean, it's more difficult in your world. You're doing little bites of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, look, I hear, and I think it's such a great thing to do, to be able to sort of move around into different topics and kind of guide what is now a really loyal audience through that. I think it's fantastic. I mean, I'm sort of lucky in the same way that I do get to sit down with a CEO. I feel very lucky that I am in the room and I get to ask a question of Michelle Bullock an hour after
that's
the interest rate goes up.
That's so cool.
I mean, it's cool, but it's a responsibility, and I want people to know that I take it seriously.
What question did you ask, by the way? We know what the ABC asked.
Yeah, I mean, look, I basically wanted to know how she feels about the amount of pressure that she's putting on households.
Can you share her response?
Yeah. And you can see it again. I mean, she basically said, look, I understand that it's difficult and I understand this is a blunt instrument because, what we were talking about before, is it fair that it piles onto borrowers and they are expected to turn the wheel of the economy while others have more money to spend and, borrowers, some of them are going to go broke as a result of an interest rate increase or 2 or 3.
Or stop paying the kids' ballet classes or something will stop.
Yeah. And I think what I learnt from the response was that, Michelle Bullock, the board, central bankers in general, they're not blind to this. They are working in the confines of pretty specific sets of goals and a pretty inelegant tool and mechanism to do that.
With lots of elegant data and lots of elegant models, but a really blunt instrument, as they all say.
And it to be honest, it made me, and I have a huge amount of respect for Michelle Bullock. I say, I have watched her do that press conference a lot of times now. I think that she is patient and I think she really does want to get the message across as clearly and responsibly as she can. And so I think, my hat is all the way off. And I take the responsibility of asking a question quite seriously. But you have to really think about it. You have to think about what is going to help me structure a narrative into this story. How am I going to get the viewer from one end of the story to the other and then have a really clear idea of what's going on? And I think for that day on Tuesday, I thought people are going to feel like they've been smashed here. A large portion of the population is going to feel like, what just happened?
Unfair.
In November, it was supposed to be more cuts in 2026. And here we are, first meeting back February, we got a hike. That's what I expected people at home to say. And so I wanted to say, what do you say to the people who are feeling a bit hit for 6 here? And her response was reasonable, I thought.
Yeah, and I thought your skip was quite measured, but it was quite clever too. I mean, you were Michelle Bullock, or you weren't the Reserve Bank governor. You were what did you call yourself?
Central banker. Because to the point before, these are dynamics that people are familiar with elsewhere in the world as well.
Yeah, that would have probably got some acceptance overseas, particularly in the United States. But you were the central banker, but then you were also the consumer, sitting at the other end, talking to yourself.
And I find that can be helpful for the audience as well, to have a proxy and sort of say, okay, let's slow this down. What do you mean by that? And I think it's kind of nice to be able to, even to yourself, force yourself to explain it to yourself.
Yeah. And be that person.
Yeah,
be both persons.
Strip it right. Subtract everything. What am I really trying to say here?
That's actually a good way of putting it. Because if you've got to be both persons, it makes you've got to be the central banker and the consumer who doesn't quite understand the central bank speak. That makes you actually probably have a better understanding of the plight of both.
That's nice of you, because I certainly don't want to ever point the finger unless it's absolutely necessary and say, this person's a baddie. I just don't see that in our economy. I see competing incentives a lot of the time. I see an interesting and lively jungle out there. But, we are fairly lucky in Australia, as we discussed before. We're well regulated. Major institutions have a relatively close eye cast on them. I think what I don't want to do is be, overly cynical and paint somebody in a way that is completely unfair. I just don't want to do that. And I'm trying not to.
Is that your generation? Because do you think your generation is more fair than, say, maybe my generation, and particularly in terms of journalism?
I don't know about that. I mean, more fair. I like a lot of the journalists who came the generation before me. I think they did a pretty good job.
But they were a little bit more brutal, I think.
Do you think so? I mean, you probably had to cop some hard questions.
I did, totally. And I copped flenty of stuff that felt like was unfair and inaccurate. But I think, I just think that those journalists Joe never got me. That was great. Thank God, because Joe's probably the worst. I mean, the best of the worst. And what I remember, that is the toughest.
Strike fear.
He's the best hard marker there is.
Yeah.
The Joe Aston I'm talking about, as you know. Joe was, I never really got through his crosshairs, thank God. But I did get plenty of criticism in various ways. And I felt as though, I feel as though today's journalism, if you look at the Daily Mail and those sorts of things, I think they're fairer.
You think so? Okay.
I think they're more measured.
That's good. I mean, I think that's a good outcome.
Yeah.
And for somebody in your position who's been and seen the way
I've seen
it can be,
best and worst.
You can, yeah. I think that's good news. Because we it's not a good thing to be too, one-sided
or too brutal.
Too brutal. Yeah.
I mean, and we have enough of that when we watch Trump, etc. Like we see the brutality of world leaders. I don't think we need to sort of see the same thing both also at a journalistic level. I mean, I think maybe because some of the world leaders are so brutal these days that journalists are actually sort of starting to pull back. And I think social media helps you that way because you find out very quickly whether you've been unfair or fair. Yep. People will tell you straight up.
People do tell you. They tell you to go harder, or that you've missed the point, or that that's not the real issue. And of course, they're entitled to their opinion. But I mean, look, I think it's very important not to dehumanize anyone. And to your point before, Anthony Miller is a great bloke. He's sitting atop a very large,
tough job too
institution. I don't think CEOs of banks are evil in any way.
No.
At all, and I hope it doesn't come off that way. In fact, when I do these skits, I want people to see that there's a person there. Sometimes the intent is to make money. Sometimes it's at a cost to ethics, perhaps. But I mean, everyone's just a person, really. At the end of the day,
I can definitely say none of the big bank leaders are evil. None. I know most of them. I've had dinner or had some interaction with them at some point of the big five, and they're all good people doing their best. They've got shareholder obligations, and which is why we should have more of those conversations with those individuals. Well, mate, I'm going to give this one quick pump. How they get you, Chris Kohler. Now, I'm not sure, but I think the chapters are probably a better representation of what the book is, because he's not really telling you that. He doesn't really say who they are, but there's 24 chapters, and I think, and it's for me anyway, this sort of stuff is the sort of stuff that we need to read, and it's a good representation of how society has changed and how we got to start to think about how we spend our lives whilst they earn their lives. So we've got to start thinking about how we spend our lives, and this is by Chris Kohler. Good luck to you, mate.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
As always.